All right, just checking to see if we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Very excited to be here. Let me just turn. Looks like we are live, which is good. And it looks like DLive is working this time. Sorry, just checking on YouTube to see if they're yeah, YouTube is working. Hello to everybody in YouTube. We have the great Michael Tsarion here today. It's a huge honor to have him here. He had checked out my recent show. Hope you guys got to check it out. Getting into conspiracy theory, where I was basically taking to task this latest effort by Canadian mainstream media, where they produced through their popular show W5 this basically debunkumentary into anything related to conspiracy. And so I hope you checked out that video. And then Michael basically sent me an email saying, hey, I've got some extra points to add. So I'm always ready and willing to have you here, Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your view. You've been doing this for far longer than I have. What has it been? 30, 40 years? I'm not sure. You've been doing this a long time, but definitely would love to hear your take on this subject, because this kind of stuff's flying around everywhere. You can go to Psychology Today, you can go to any of these mainstream publications, and they're basically trying to take all conspiracy theories, put them in a basket, and then attack that basket. They're not going on individual subjects. They're not obviously paying any subject. I mean, of course, you and I know these are paid agents. The media oracles, their reputation is through the floor right now. But kick it off with what your first reactions were to some of that content that I was covering in that video.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on. It's a conversation that has to happen, because they're actually on very weak ground. I think you already pointed it out. I mean, your comments were just excellent, but I just wanted to make sure that people that was embossed. That they're on weak ground. How could you possibly? I've been into this thing for exactly almost 20 years this year. 2020 and 21 is about 20 years altogether in being known, right? But there's 15, 20 before that. I'd say maybe about 10. It's really hard to say. I mean, in one way I got back into this in almost 1982 with the Jim Fitzpatrick and the story of Ireland. So it does go back quite a long way. But the thing is that even in the 20-year period that I've been public, how can somebody who's a 20-something on one of these ludicrous shows debunk what somebody who spent 30 years researching? Already we got a problem there, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And they wouldn't allow it to happen either if they had spent 10, 20, 30 years, like I have researching it. So that is already effrontery that is uncustomary and uncalled for in our society today. These are the ones who are meant to be politically correct. Well, why don't you start? Why don't you honor your own dictum? Right? I'm not politically correct, but you are. So then how come you're slurring the work of people like Alex Constantine and, all the names that you mentioned, so many yourself?
Oh, and on that point, Michael, I've just posted in the description of the YouTube video. I got to add it everywhere else, and I'll do a post on it. But you sent me a master list of researchers, authors, insiders, whistleblowers, some good guys, some bad guys. You sent me a big master list of just the scores and scores of names. And I'll bet you that's even just skimming the surface, isn't it?
Sure, that's a short list.
Wow.
But the one thing about that list is they're all eminent, right? And many of them are super eminent. And that can be added to. I don't know if Nicholas Hager's in there. I don't know if I put David Ovison, right? So there's our top cartographers, David Wood. There's conspiracies that are shallow, that a show like that might get, 0.25 of a star, because yes, there are bat crazy people out there who believe in idiotic conspiracies like flat Earth, right, and so on. So what they're trying to do is tar the whole of that deeper research, as if people have just even heard the word. Right. So, and they're right. A lot of people for the very first time have heard that strange, peculiar, amorphous term, right? Conspiracy theory. And they immediately form a very basic, tawdry, and rather insufficient idea of what it means. Knowing that these channels focus on that. That's their main agenda, is to take pretty much a dingbat level of insight into what that means, right? And then, and reinforce that meaning. And hoping that you won't do any further study or pick up any books Like I said, Jim Keith. We started our
Mm,
Architects of Control in homage to him, right? And Alex Constantine, and the list goes on. They're just hoping you won't do that. These books are becoming actually a little bit harder to find. Certainly the ones I would recommend are hard to find, and you may never have heard of them in your whole life. Some of them on that list, authors on that list. So these people are hoping that you just simply won't, won't go there. But just from the off, there were so many points to get into that you'd raised, but that was the first one. Is this not going to happen? No matter how you try, no matter how much of an arsenal you bring out these shows, you're not going to be able to refute the deep study of somebody who's been for 30 years, and I'm not just speaking of myself, but others. You're not going to do that. Did you notice, but getting into the hard facts of that show, did you notice something maybe the audience didn't, and they should be aware of this? There was no pro-conspiracy advocate or expert on. So time
exactly.
after time when these shows were made, they're so utterly biased, it's fatuous, right? It's the Simpsonization of a deep study and a great subject. And it's obvious from the start by the fact that there was only debunkers, no one to advocate what the conspiracy people believe. You had that nitwit woman who's giving an idea of, in fact, it was very female generated, the whole thing, by the way, right? And the conversation could be had on that alone. Because how many conspiracy people, the great researchers, are women? There's hardly any, sorry to have to say, but I deal in facts. So if you even take the whole movement of conspiracy theory from from Tsarist Russia onwards, right up to the present day, it's hard to even mention a single credible female source, by the way. That's just a fact, right? Maybe Phyllis Schlafly, and she's more of a politician. So again, it's very, very difficult to name them, especially those who've been cutting edge, okay? They're almost entirely men. But getting back to the point, there was no one to advocate for what serious conspiracy people do. So then it's just trash. It's just your pulp, showcasing of a lie. That's the first case. It was all neg. There was no single piece of pro there at all. It's just
Yeah,
scurrilous.
I'm so glad you saw that too, because I'm like, they didn't even bring Nigel on. They didn't even bring poor Nigel, who's just this guy who they're basically doing in a character attack. He should sue them for defamation. He should. If he's listening to this, Nigel, we've got some lawyers. We've got legal precedent here. They just smeared you publicly. We disagree on certain things, but man, I agree with your right to free speech and your right to a fair trial. And the fact that a Canadian company interviewed a British woman about you being a crazy nutball or whatever is just egregious. So this guy should be up in arms just for the fact that they're talking about him. They're making him look like he's some kind of a terrorist. He's got air rifles. He's got air rifles and gasoline cans. He's a terrorist. And like, it's cartoonish. And I mean, I could have just walked away from it, but I couldn't resist that one, Michael. I couldn't resist. It's a Canadian, I had family that used to work for CTV a long time ago. And like, I had to go after it. It's getting so cartoonish and ridiculous that anybody that's paying them any time is wasting it. But doesn't that say everything too? The fact they don't even let you comment on the videos. They don't let you rate the videos. They don't want your opinion. They don't want anybody else's opinion. They only want that one layer of information. And that's how you know it's bullshit, as you just said.
Sure. In their own lives and in their careers, these are bottom feeders. Did you know that a poll was taken back in the, I think it was the 80s or early 90s, in which they found out that the stupidest people on earth are journalists? So when Bill, yeah, it's a fact. When Bill Hicks is telling the marketer, just shoot yourself, I would add in journalists. Go ahead, right? These mainstream idiots. They're bottom feeders, and they have their own derangement syndromes. Everybody's been talking about derangement syndrome where it doesn't belong, right? In terms, but it certainly belongs in the media, who cannot even see the tragedy of what they're doing to society, right? But yeah, first of all, they brought on nobody to speak intelligently for. And what that tells an intelligent person is this is scurrilously biased, right? And doesn't need to be paid any attention to. And then the point is, it's not going to work anyway. No matter what they do, no matter how many idiots like this Professor Black, you and I have done at least 2 more shows on this, and we tore that guy to pieces, right? There's no way. Doesn't matter who they wheel out, because intelligent people are more open now in the last 4 or 5 years to the rationale behind conspiracy theorists than ever before. Not to say that there aren't the bat crazy versions out there. But that's where intelligence comes in. And that kind of intelligence is needed when you even buy a simple product off the shelf. So we're not asking, we never have asked for anyone to have an intelligence rating, that's MIT level. Every human being has enough intelligence to be able to, speak about a bat crazy or to sense a very, spurious conspiracy theory. But Monsanto is not spurious conspiracy theory. What's happening now to the U.S. government being held under with a gun to its head is not in any way conspiracy theory. The barrage of media all singing from the own hymn sheet, from the same hymn sheet, is not conspiracy theory. But also, I think it's very important to bring out something odd in the terminology. Everybody today has big tech as one of these phrases. Everybody's talking about deep state, this phrase that just appeared from nowhere, right? Are they synonyms for the Illuminati? Yes, they are. So look at the power of rhetoric and the power of sophistry, which you mentioned on your show, is so ancient. It goes back before Julius Caesar and all the way back, to ancient Greece, right? They were already commenting on the sophistry of how it changes minds and changes societies, and has so much geopolitical weight, right? When I hear these people talking about deep state, and big tech, and there are other terms as well, military industrial complex, I keep hearing synonym for the Illuminati, but this is how the game is played. This is how the goalposts are shifted. There is not an ounce of difference. It's all just wordplay. So the fatuousness of that is also, in one way, needs to be brought to light, because you guys are now admitting covertly through the web of sophistry, through the shield of sophistry, that what we used to call the Illuminati for convenience, and always told you that was just a term, but our content was completely dismissed and debunked. It's part of the social narrative now.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's a silver lining in there. That means that more population than ever are open-minded to the fact that there are conspiracy theories. That's a huge step forward. Of course, I'm not denying that. But there's more to go, because a lot of the conspiracy research is is not infantile stage, but it's at an early stage still, and we need room. I argued this in one of my articles, and that's good. Maybe now we'll be given that privilege.
Well, I call them comfort terms. They're comfortable terms for intellectuals and people who study these things and go, yeah, it's like, you get these guys like Steve Bannon or whatever, and you love them for certain things, but then they'll come out and their whole tagline is, there are no such things as conspiracy theories or conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. It's like, just come out and say it, just say it. But that these guys have all been whipped and flogged. They don't want to lose their channels. They're trying. I think also sometimes people are trying to create these comfort terms as a different strategy to reach the people who've been brainwashed by the media their whole lives. But in the end, this is why I love talking to people like you, Michael. You've been in this for so long. You've been there through all the different names that this thing has been given. In the end, what are we studying here? We're studying human criminology. We're studying the nature of evil. Isn't that what this really boils down to?
It's exactly what it boils down to, and it has on an individual level that people can grasp, and it's on the social historical level that most people cannot grasp, because of historical amnesia and just what's known as monotheism, the extraordinary focus on what's in front of you now and all of that. But when I get into this movement, I knew that conspiracy was a dirty word, but I'm being stoical. I'm a stoic. That which you cannot change, don't bother, don't lose any sleep over it. So I said, okay, we've got some dirty words hanging around there. They're kind of prejudicial. Maybe they shouldn't be used, right? But I can't change it. I'm not going to back out of the door and clear off just because of that. That kind of thing happens in all sorts of areas of life, right? So that which I can't change, I'm not going to sweat about. Let me get involved with what I want to do. So despite these prejudicial terms that will always be thrown in your face, that didn't deter me. Now, maybe it deters other people, going, yeah, okay, I just hate being called that. I see what's going on. But see, mentioning of history there is an important part as well, is because conspiracy theory cannot be proved with historical amnesia. So one of the sticks in the spokes that sometimes does trip us up, actually, we have to acknowledge, because we have still work to do about this, is that don't expect people with monotheism who are only focused on what's happening, like a millennial on the day he was born and after, that's what he's focused on. And a whole society that also has lost complete concept of history, both cultural and traditional, isn't even capable of proving conspiracy. It's like that. This is the diagnosis that you have of a society that seems to be hair trigger reactivity to that term. But in one way, if you go into looking at it like I've done as to why people are resistant, that's one of them. Because only a person who loves history can look back at history, like Voltaire said, right? Can start to smell the rat and put the pieces together. And the weird thing about that is that in a way, life itself does not want you to stay ignorant. Nature doesn't like a vacuum, and life doesn't like ignorance. So in many ways, and I think we can see it in the world we're in right now, is life itself is not allowing you to perpetuate the lie. Life is bringing the truth, the conspiracy to your door, because you can deny it all you want, but that's an unnatural tendency. So I'm not leaving it to man. I don't serve man. I don't think of mass movements and change, right? I serve the truth, and life will always bring the truth in front of you. Always, despite your will. No matter what you do, you can't fight it, right? It will not allow you to harbor lies perpetually. And that's even on the social level. So there's other movements that are taking place. Get used to it, I say. No, we've won. Like I just said, my opening remarks here is to show that anyone who's been into conspiracy theory no longer has to, wear the leper's badge. It's far beyond that. These 5 years have shown that we're 100% correct. The rational ones, the sane ones, right? So there's no looking back anymore. There's no stigma. None at all. But still, that means that there's still work to be done, right? And one of them is inform people that, look, you will not be allowed to live in the dark. Events in your personal life and in society are going to continue happening until they break through the wall of your cognitive dissonance. So, get used to it or be dragged to the truth either way. I would hope that people would do it through their will.
I love it. And I agree 100%. And you started this off, I think, was it in your Origins of Evil presentation? It was one of your earlier presentations where you were basically saying, you were talking about this plutonic action that was going to take place. And it's because when you look at the psyche, and we've done, like, just so people know, you have to check out the unslaved.com website. Michael and I produce weekly premium content on all these subjects. And we've been doing a lot on the psyche and on the individual level. What is it that stops the individual, you, me, from accessing the truth of our own perception in life? So forget about what the world is doing and the Illuminati and the round tables and the World Economic Forum. What kind of a conspiracy is happening in your own being that's preventing you from listening to that still small voice, the truth, the real God, the kingdom of heaven, however you want to call it? What's stopping you? And so what, Michael, to me, what you've breaking down there is that action happens naturally. If we avoid self, if we avoid the truth in our own personal lives, one day it's going to creep up. That you can try to hide it and build barriers and armoring around it, but eventually it's going to crack through. And either that's going to make you psychotic and neurotic, or you're going to recognize it and make changes. And you're saying that this also applies to the social world, the big geopolitical world. And we've gone into this in terms of astrology, talking to people like Fiona and many others to see the cycles of time and all of that. And we know these Illuminists, they track those cycles also. So anybody that thinks that's nonsense, it's good enough for them. You should be studying it at least to learn what they believe. So maybe just comment a bit more on that relation between the self and the world, and how that action, that plutonic cleansing action of bringing all the dirt to the surface, is a natural action that nothing can really stop, no matter how hard it tries.
Yeah, and America is actually Cancerian, so I don't want to get into all the astrology, but there's plutonic energy there as well as there is lunar and Jupiterian, but absolutely there is a natural cycle, the winter cycle. We're actually in it right now seasonally. People have to realize that that's also the case for the psyche. There's an autumn and a fall cycle and a winter cycle in terms of psychology, and they should get used to it. But of course, in our Western tradition, we haven't looked into any of that, right? We have almost no religion that's nature-based. Like maybe the Shinto in Japan would be a perfect example of. We don't have any of that. We don't have anything that approximates Taoism. We've got some New Age stuff. Yeah, great. Look what that's done for the world, right? That's purely Gnostic, which in my eyes is utterly, perverse and evil. So that's not going to work. No, you have to realize that you can't live in a one-season world, and you then have to doubt the forces out there who treat you as a person that is that one-dimensional, like a shop, dummy. And you got to watch out for the people who are stage managing, the window dressing, the kind of cultural milieu that will make you feel that you and your kids, live in a one-dimensional world. They live in that. Now the trouble is that takes you into psychology. It's not conspiracy, it's psychology, because then you're dealing with personality types now, right? And personality types that might get to the top, like a Billy Gates, and others who get up there and then they start ruling the rest of us. Now they are few. There's no question about that, right? And these are people who are so psychotic, they have no tolerance even for some of their own kind. These people have had pillow fights on the historical level, bringing down entire dynasties. What do they think of you? You're just slugs to them. Right? Can't you hear the laughter? Right? But it's psychotic laughter. And then they will then pick another tier of, loonies, constitutional moral inferiors is the technical term. And then they will, again, it's concentric circles. They will employ, the next level of journalists and writers and pundits and smart alecks, that get on television and everything to spread more lies, to spread these myths about the status quo, and to completely lie to you about history, like that show completely lied to you, right? And was already so biased that they didn't even bother having an advocate on to speak for. Look, judge, jury, and executioner all in one. Yeah, brilliant. No wonder people are dropping mainstream shows, like you said on the show that you made, and going to alternative sources. Yeah, because dumbasses, they're sick of you. They're sick of this extraordinary bias of, I've called it, excuse my language, pissing on the lamppost like the dog does. You cannot urinate on knowledge. You cannot call it Christian knowledge or, Islamic knowledge or whoever, knowledge is knowledge. It's free for everyone to go and study. But these people always want to territorialize. Right? And that's partly why they're Gnostics. But the wise man says, I think these guys are right. There is a worldwide conspiracy at work. We've just had, what more proof do you need? You've just had a stolen election. You've had voter fraud, the likes of which the history of the world has never seen. The US is presently being run with a gun to its head by nothing but a syndicate. We've got the China virus. We've got lockdown. We've got pandemics. We've got global collapse. And we haven't got a murmur of resistance against it. What on earth could tell you that there's no conspiracy, you see? So when they see that thousands and thousands of more people are accepting that there's a conspiracy, they make shows like the one you critiqued. Those are rolled out because they're desperately afraid that the dam has busted already.
So it might even be a good sign. It might be a good sign, actually,
that they're
trying to do this. Yeah.
To people who've done the 30 years of homework in the dark and got nothing but, scoffing and sneering and ridicule, of course it's a good sign. It's our VE day. It's a triumph. It came in chaos and flames, but we had to be used to that as well. We had to forecast that, because when we tried to give it, tastily and respectfully, people threw you out of the party. So that leaves a plutonic type of person to say, because plutonic energy is not just something in the sky. Plutonic energy is the dam buster. It's the Panzer tank that rolls over your lies. It's the sort of dark light, or the blue flame of anger, whatever way you want to say it, that won't go away just because you live in a bubble of a one-season world. Right? We will scrounge and scavenge and do whatever is needed to bring the truth to humankind. We're not going away. Now, it's because they know that we've won. You see, that show is a reaction to the fact that they know that those weird conspiracy guys out there have proved their point and proved their mandate. And so that's what I wanted to talk about right now, is that signs a milestone, right? And so that people who are genuine can get on to the deeper work. Don't be trying to impress anyone anymore. The job is done. It cannot be dismissed, particularly those who've really done sincere work. What lies ahead to be done? Well, that's what I've been doing myself for years, which is, it's okay to understand that there's debunkers of conspiracy and all of that, and that some of us might have been really trying to prove, the rightness of the task and everything, that it's right to be into these subjects. That's fine too, but you don't need to be doing that anymore. The next work is to get into showing the world what are the mechanics and the techniques of the actual conspiracy. Now that it's proven that there is one operating in the world, even to the people who would be so resistant. Okay, that's just opening that's just the hors d'oeuvre. That's just the appetizer. Now you will bring them in and really convert them when you examine and show and display and explain, and expose the mechanics and the techniques of conspiracy, which involves a lot of different things: etymology, the use of words, right? The use of symbolism, the use of color and light, and why those are mechanisms, right? Talismanic terms, community, democracy, right? You hear them all day long. Do you know the value that, on the limbic brain of those things? You see, so that's what I mean. Or how light, for instance, is used, how sound is used to change brainwave states. See, our work is that, but you'll never get a show like that ever telling you that that's what we're doing, that we're trying to break reality distortion. We're trying to make sure that episodes of mass hysteria do no longer take place like they've just done, right? But they're never going to credit you with a single positive. They're not going to say history needs to be brought back. I understand why it faded, in the days before the war, the First World War, with immigrants coming over to America from Europe who wanted to put the war behind them and put a lot of continental traditions behind it. Look, it's all understandable, but it was a mistake. They're coming to America to look for the big kick, look for the big thrill, and they found it. But in getting all that new and all that bigness and largeness and all of these larger than life, experiences, yeah, but there was a price for that, and the price was that you dumpstered extraordinarily powerful European traditions. Well, yeah, those are great, and those were the work of your forefathers. They can be brought back again. So the conspiracy theorist, right, far from being insane, if he's one that's doing the high work, the great work, he's also trying to restore you, not only to alert you to how symbolism, light, sound, and all of that is used, the symbolism, but he's also trying to restore some of the finest traditions that were stupidly, trashed by that first generation of immigrants coming over looking for the spaghetti. They were enamored by the largesse of America and the promise of a new life and new kicks. Well, yeah, but there was a cost. There was a deep, deep cost for that. And we left ourselves stark naked, culturally speaking.
Yeah, very well said. And you brought up a really important point, is that even to myself, like my instinct is, oh, you guys you want to go on, you want to fight? I'm always down for a good scrap with these pundits and sophists. But the key work, as you said, is the healing process now. Okay, we've got, just look at how many of these alternative channels are blowing up multiple times bigger than the biggest mainstream talk shows, right? So that shows you everything. People are curious, they're hungry for knowledge, okay? And yes, in that sort of rush to when people are all just snapping out of it and go, yeah, they are right. There is evil in the world. The government isn't to be trusted in this moment. The media is not to be. So all kinds of craziness and bizarre theories come out. I look at that as a healthy process because that's natural. It's a natural thing that eventually people will, give it time, comes back to some sanity. But just understanding about how to cure it, how to heal it, that's the key. But you mentioned something too, I wondered if you would expand on a bit, because this was huge for me when you brought it up years ago, was the use of light. Even that term that you brought up, the Illuminati, that's light. They're talking about light. And one thing that us humans keep getting fooled by is soothsayers of light. It's the same reason we fall for the advertisements on television and the product turns out to be nothing like what they said it was going to be, or these crazy religions or the cults or the political cults or whatever cult you want. It's all using light, because the question is always not, oh, there's evil in the world. Okay, there's evil psychopaths, but again, there are a few. Why do hordes of well-meaning, good people that have families and just want to get ahead in life, why do they sign on for it? And it's because of a technique. It's two. One is on the error is on the side of the person that signs up for the cult, right? They have to address their own journey and all that. But then the other is that they are wielding a light that is attractive to us. So religion has done this, scientism has done this, the media does this, Hollywood does it, etc. And so you had this really good explanation of how in the secret society tradition, how light was looked at as a way of doing one of two things. In the legitimate schools, light was inner light, and it was what you would get from someone like, Goethe or some of these shelling, the idea of what light really is, Walter Russell, The Secret of Light. Like there's that kind of light, okay? And then there's the light to blind you, to shine a light in your face, which obscures everything else. Could you maybe break that down? Because it was brilliant. And that's what really honestly helped wake me up. And you said it years ago.
Yeah, the media couldn't be the media without light. Of course, they use sound and color and rhythm and all of these things. But you see, instead of debunking conspiracy theory, why don't you actually do, what they ask you to do? And that is to study your environment from a psychological or insightful point of view. And start with, like I said, the use of words, the use of symbolism. Because in the earlier days when I began this, that's how I would do it. Because to come at them full force wasn't didn't work, right? So you have to intrigue. It was more intriguing when you're driving around and looking at logos, on cars and billboards and stuff like that. And it's very pragmatic because a lot of it's staring you in the face, and when you see it all, these Pepsodent commercials, where they'd repeat a thing 3 times, flashing this light at you, and then when they sign off, you hear this little whisper, "Get the message." All the subliminal content is what I'm really thinking about. So to answer your question is there's a subliminal use of light, right? Subliminal meaning, it has no meaning to you consciously that is happening. Now, in our society today, it's saturated with subliminal content. So that's one of the techniques I use to get people into this, to show them how their kids are being affected by it and all the rest of it. Or like I said, these extremely bright, garish, mind-controlling commercials and all of that. And it's based on this weird interplay between stealing from you something that is intrinsic and natural, and then selling it back to you, by the backdoor version of the plastic simulated version, right? So light is gnosis, light is knowledge, light is wisdom, right? So you've got it in the hands of sorcerers. That's why I make the case for Illuminatis and so on. And so it's based on a very simple principle. I've got an article on the Michael Tsarion website called Symbolic Literacy. And in that, the point is simply made that light, it's actually in almost every part of my work, light conceals as much as it reveals. It's actually a very simple concept, but hard to get at first because, again, we associate light with heat, with warmth, with brightness, with lucidity, and with enlightenment. Yeah, but there was a cult that existed, at the time of Akhenaten and before, who thought about light in a very, very different way, right? They call themselves Atenists or, Setian Atenists or whatever you want to call them. They're the ideological progenitors of what we would call Illuminati today. Because Illuminati, oh my God, that word does not just speak of some little Bavarian...
Right, it's so much bigger.
Cabal, oh yeah. This thing is connected to almost all the powerful secret societies in the world, Grand Orient, Scottish Rite, Masonry, you name it. And they have ancient roots that don't have those names. Those same groups have even more ancient forebears who use different names. We're not going to get into it now. But they did use the symbol of the sun, and they did use the symbol of light. So if I'm talking Gaionium or, other earlier cults, they were cults of the sun, meaning that they used the solar light in a certain kind of way.
It's like the cult of the Black Sun. Like we've talked about this before. This idea from the Fool Society, they called the Black Sun. This is or the dark side of the sun. You hear this symbolism all the time.
That's right. That's right. And the dark side of sun or the dark side of light is simply explained as that it scorches, it burns, and it blinds and it blinkers. So if I'm shining a very strong light at you, I'm automatically concealed if I'm behind it. So the illumined ones know exactly why they're using that term. But we never think, because we've been so solarized, we're actually being sort of mind controlled by light to such an extent we know very little about light. We don't think of it as a weapon, that's for sure. But when you start to get to be that right way, then you start to see how powerful it is as a weapon. And then your journey begins, And the same thing with various words, talismanic words like democracy. That one's thrown about in America all the time. You think of people who got aware of it by now. Community. And where's that? When, it's home. I mean, community. Do you see any community now? Advertising groups like Coca-Cola and others and NASA can run roughshod over your traditions and the community rises up, doesn't it? No.
Sadly, no.
Right. So then you see, this is where it goes, right? Conspiracy theory, right? No, we've got to. So a lot of conspiracy work of a sincere person is trying to, show people that they need to go cold turkey. They need to. There's a reset, all right, but it's not the one from Klaus Schwab. It's the reset by which you come back and empty out and disgorge all of this, propaganda of all kinds, not just the conscious propaganda, but the unconscious. If this was just a matter of people choosing to be Democrats and Republicans, I would be, selling, guitar picks or something like that for a living, and happily to do it, right? So, it's not. I've been very aware from the early on, my mentors, Brian Wilson Keyes and others, that there's a lot of subliminals involved in this. And that's when I realized it's not conscious. And if it's not conscious, then it's sorcery. And if it's sorcery, it's black magic, which needs to be, fought tooth and nail. So, that's a sketch of my history, but it always comes down to not what somebody like me says to somebody, it's down to their own homework. All of this stuff we've just talked about has to be proven. And then when you ask why they don't do it, yeah, because that's hard work. So it's easier to sit and scoff, ridicule, and lampoon and sneer.
Well,
what I'm saying now is that there's a price to pay. You may have done that, but there's a price to pay, and you're seeing that price right now in the years that we're in.
Oh yes, that's a good point. Yeah, that is the price. And isn't it interesting that that same media has actually trained people subliminally to not do the research, to not think in that way? The education system, there's a whole apparatus. You think of people like John Taylor Gatto and many others that got into the education system and how that got infiltrated and changed into this linear Cartesian type way of thinking about life and study. People have been, we don't even know how to investigate truth. It's painful. We have to pull ourselves away from the herd, become the outsider, learn from all the conspiracy theorists and wackies that you're told by Wikipedia not to listen to in order to understand even just the process of basic research, the apophatic approach, as you brought up many times, which is that Greek term for the elimination of the untrue in order to reveal the truth, which is a hard process, right? But I find it to be rewarding. This is why I do this. And when people get into it, they will see the rewarding element of that. But everybody gets turned off. So as you were saying, if they watch a program like this CTV's thing or any of these, I found out actually on the same night, Michael, in the US, they did almost an identical hit piece on conspiracy theory with 60 Minutes. So 60 Minutes in the US and CTV News and probably others were all doing this, basically the same hit piece from different angles. And you're telling me there's no coordination behind the scenes to direct your mind. And that was my biggest thing, was they're not presenting it as, oh, well, some people believe the earth is flat and some people believe this thing and some people believe that. And some people think 9/11 wasn't what they told us. What do you think? Here's some links to go research and learn for yourself. Get back to us. We're the journalists. We'd love to get a Pulitzer Prize winning story, but that doesn't happen. It only happens in these forums, on these realms. And of course, the biggest strike against these bastards for me is that they're censoring us. So the fact that they're censoring us and limiting the discussion and not having the other side on, that's how you know, guys, we've been captured. This is a captured situation.
Exactly right. That was the thing that needed to be emphasized again. Go to the link I just sent you, the one that says burden of proof, because the reason why they're censoring us is because we have succeeded in proving everything we've said. So in a way, harsh as it is to say the world in general never gets into anything we're talking about. It doesn't matter because the greats have already done it. You see what I'm saying? That the Charles Moskowitzes and many, many other people have already come through. Your Alex Constantines, your Jim Keiths, right? It's called, it's actually called preponderance of the evidence, but it's more colloquially known as burden of proof. It's what's needed in court. Well, we have fulfilled, right? I'm talking about the really sincere ones who truly have been involved for years, have completely provided the burden of proof in anything that any other courtroom situation would demand in the subject that we are addressing and talking about. So even if the marketplace doesn't get it, and it is only a small demographic of the great, ones who are on that list, okay, so shall it be then. But never say that they have not provided the burden of proof. So Professor Black and these creatures on the show that you're naming, that you're mentioning, can't have any one of us on from, from where it counts, because we have got the facts. We have already proven it, the burden of proof. So, that's why they have to do what they have to do. This, like I say, the Simpsonization, the comedic Disney version of conspiracy theory, hoping that, the people are just so gormless that they'll accept it. But I also think it's because people aren't accepting it anymore that they begrudgingly have to put on these shows. Yeah.
That's why we've been saying a lot. When do you fire your arrows? When do you fight? When do you expend ammunition in a combat situation? You do it when you're defending, when you're in defensive mode, right? Otherwise, you would save that ammunition. You would save that energy. You would conserve that energy. If the media is, because think about it, they don't just have to whip this together. That takes money. They got to hire people. They probably got to pay off some of these guys that are like, I was part of a conspiracy theory group and now I'm in recovery. They got to pay these people. They got to find, there's a lot of time, energy, and money that goes into trying to debunk something that's apparently just completely ridiculous and you shouldn't look into it. And it's coordinated around the world. I think they said in the year 2020, there were over 5,000 hit piece articles on conspiracy theorists. 5,000 from different media outlets, all attacking centrally around the election with Donald Trump, around coronavirus. They're like, oh, don't listen to those coronavirus conspiracy theories who have some kind of weird problem with the flawed PCR testing. Forget about that. There's all these pieces that you will find that are funded and coordinated. And we know the guys, the George Soroses and all that. But more to the point, I think what you're bringing up, Michael, is the idea of, so what? That's our mindset now. So what? We expect them to do it. We expect the lying tyrants and criminals to be lying tyrants and criminals. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And in the end, we also, maybe there's another point to bring up here that I've always thought about, which is I desperately want at least a certain amount of people to wake up so that, for example, in Canada, we don't turn into Venezuela because that's the track record Canada's on, right? So, you try to get out there and let people know and talk to the people that will listen to you. But in the same process, I don't want to be guilty of violating sovereignty or of anybody, or trying to push an idea on somebody that they're not ready for, because even in psychological terms, hitting people with this kind of information at the wrong time could cause a worse reaction in their psyche and cause it to implode, right? So there's got to be some kind of a tactfulness of it. And maybe just the whole thing is, when you build it, they will come, which is what we've done. We've built Unslaved. I built this channel. Millions of people are building their channels, writing books, doing blogs, doing shows. And we're seeing more people naturally of their own volition and freedom coming to hear what we have to say, even though the media is putting out these hit pieces all of the time. And the final thing I'll say is, one point I really had to bring up in that little debunkumentary thing was that the media got the whole election of Trump wrong in 2016. They totally messed that up. Everybody was saying, oh, it's impossible. And they laughed at him, and then he beat it. And that alone sort of proved something, did it? But do you ever see the media come out and go, well, we're in our recovery groups for being a part of the Trump will never be elected president conspiracy theory, so we're setting the example for all of you. And think of the other countless times they've been wrong. So I don't know, just a few points to throw in there.
And they should have. Do you see any change in them or contrition after losing the second impeachment?
None whatsoever. They want to try it again.
The evil one just carries on, right? It's like they are the fungus, they're the virus. Right. There's no inward self-reflection. There's no contrition. Why would you want people like that who can't even admit fault, even when they're so colossally at fault? It is in the history books now. Yeah. How can you want your country run by those kinds of people? Isn't that enough psychopathy for you? So my feeling is, you see, that only the psychopathy is a drip down phenomena, right? And that people identify with these authority figures, they allow them to do what they're doing. They even vote them in, all of these other aspects that fill my work up. So, it's never for me just been a case of blaming those on the Hill. In fact, every time I see a headline or anything like that, I'm always first, even though the headline looks again about government, atrocities or terrors or, mandates and whatever, I'm always first thinking about who allowed this to happen, whether it's in Texas or, wherever there's an evil. Always look for the consent that drove that evil to become established. Because the government at the end of the day only say things. They don't force people to act at all. That's a lie. The people act like mannequins, right? Like puppets on a string, you see. So a few tugs I've always shown it in my work as you can either be pursued by a giant, killer whale and swallowed, a big monster or leviathan, or the leviathan can just sit there with its mouth wide open, in the water, and you just sail right into it. Which of the two do you think, is indicative of the last, of the 21st century and even before that? It's quite obviously the latter. We are so impoverished when it comes to, these things that great writers and thinkers have tried to bring to the table in a more pragmatic way even than that, because that's mostly an intellectual sort of, reinforcement of your sovereignty when you study these things. It's very, very necessary. But even on a physical level, even when it comes to some very petty stuff, we're legally so disempowered. I mean, to the point where everything that's happening now to civilians who don't know how to work it, when they go through the airport and they're hassled, or into a Safeway and they're hassled, or wherever they're going in Britain, haven't they got a clue that that's so simple to deal with? And in our work, we're always doing the legal thing to show how easy it is. But see, no, the answer is no. People don't even have the basic legal empowerment. And that's why they get walked over. So again, I keep looking at the individual's responsibility in this, and it's a very big one. It's not for us to sit there spoon feeding them like, they're infantile. People need to finally step up. And as I say, instead of looking for all the big whizzes and the car scenes and the love chases, this last 5 years, has catalyzed a lot of people to finally get serious about politics. I love humor just like the other person does, and I know the value of humor, right? That it kills tragedy. So I understand that in certain contexts. But I also know that when people are over, satirizing what's taking place, when they should be really, really serious, our rights are being taken away, and all you find on Facebook is jocularity and hilarity, and it's very below the belt. It's not good. It's not just killing tragedy, it's avoiding it. Right? Tragedy is in our world, huh?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's the type of humor that might come from a good comedian that's going to hit you with truth. With some people would say humor is just a funny way of telling the truth. But then there's just, as you say, would you say it's a kind of it can become a form of an escapism as a way to ease trauma as opposed to facing trauma,
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I understand that totally. That's why I don't go on and on about it, is because, people do need that little humor to vent. And so I'm okay with it. I just don't like it. Sometimes it goes overboard, but right. It's a minor point. The main thing is it's a study. Conspiracy, which will never be told you by these programs or anyone like them. It's a study of how the human mind is manipulated, but not manipulated like it's instructor, sergeant, major, general walking up and down, and saying, get those buttons polished. It's not that kind of instruction, right? It's peripheral. It's the kind of manipulation that's mostly peripheral. Now, there are times in history, which is now, where you actually get to see the lineaments of that dynamic. But you might want to recoil from it. You see, you might want to cover your face and pretend it's not happening. And that's what people are getting the chance now. They can either recoil from what's happening, and then they become, they aid the evil that's taking place. They become responsible, or they can see it and bravely and heroically face, oh my God, it's true. We are being manipulated, and here's how. And it's back to words and light, and brainwave manipulation, subliminal advertisement, for instance, and certainly by symbolism. So it's a study. It has to start somewhere. And I'm hoping that at every time when there's an upheaval like this, hopefully it catalyzes people to sincerely, because there's a lot of coattail riders and a lot of fakes out there even into this subject. So, still trying to come in with some other negative message or to lead people down into cul-de-sacs. And there's also a lot of infiltration from upstairs as well, by the way. So
right.
That's not good. But when people are talking about deep states and big techs and all of these other complexes and, Facebook and social media, look, to me, it's just synonyms for the secret societies that have a very, very long history. Right. And that the study of that history to me is very, very fascinating, because it involves not just history, but psychology, geopolitics, and many other subjects. And it's really come down to the wire now. If America, right, doesn't start opening itself to even the basics of this, it's finished. Right? The experiment's over. Right? Has been predicted by, so many people who saw it going in this direction. Because in every instance, when you had a Nikola Tesla, or you had a Walter Russell, or you had a Max Gerson, or a Henry T. Moray, right, and Raymond Royal Rife, they were suppressed. All caps and bold and underlined. That's the history of America. The suppression. How do you get an AMA? How do you get an FDA? Right? How do you get an IRS? How do you get a Federal Reserve? From the suppression of original, right, grassroots movements. Many of them funded by aristocrats and wealthy people, meaning capitalists, were for the grassroots. See, there's been so much editing and so much nonsense talking about that 1% that it gets this rabble at the bottom, right? The really useless eaters, to start thinking of in terms of even an overtly class struggle. Actually, if you dig back, it wasn't that at all. You see, but how do you start educating a person to that? How do you verify that? They're all going, no, give me a rotten tomato. I'm going to throw it at that guy who said that. It's class all the way. Well, actually, no, it's not. Right? And a few minutes of homework can easily prove that to you, that in the early days of America, the rich were the benefactors of society. But because you've got a communized media, you'll never hear that. And I could add on thousands of such anecdotes. Your whole world has been turned upside down and inside out. So when I talk about the traditions, you know, studying the traditions, coming back, it's like a form of getting sane. When you read the works of great masters, that's the only way you'll remain sane. If you're not a genius yourself, you have the choice to be near to those who are, right? That's what I've done all my life. Stay close to the thinking of the genius types so that, you know, there's the sanitization taking place and you don't lose your kilter. You don't listen to the crowd and the madness, and you don't fall for the necrophilous will of the crowd. You know, and that means the Spanglers and, you know, all these people that we name and talk about through our work. And they just come from one discipline. Every discipline, from psychology to anthropology to ecology to philosophy, right? Poetry, art, you see, you know, storytelling, fiction. Look at J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and others I could mention, right? Owen Barfield. There's wisdom pouring out of the past. So when you build a wall and say, well, I don't want to know anything about that, where's the kicks? Then you get the world that you've got right now. But the solution is to open the door. Pull that stuff out of it. Do some dumpster diving. You might find a few pearls.
Brilliant. Yeah. And if, talking about, we were saying there about the class struggle, Thomas Sowell popped into my head. People should go read his books. I got a few good books of his, just great quotes, and so many other, like you've made a collection of brilliant minds on every subject you can find on the Unslaved site, in your articles that you've written. We look at, you know, on Unslaved, we look at things on both sides, you know, of different discussions, trying to get to the truth. The whole point is getting to the truth. Now, Michael, you had some articles here about Trotsky. Was there something about Trotsky you wanted to bring up today?
Yeah, see, in 1917, right? Remember I said the preponderance of the preponderance of evidence. Read about that and lock into what it actually means. Because what it means is we are knee deep in conspiracies, all proven and on the books, folks. So never pay attention to any of these debunkers ever again. Just give you, you know, a couple of examples. One was the, you can, there's so much. We've talked about the medical mafia and other work. There's a conspiracy. Right? You can talk about the fall of the Tsar in Russia. Wasn't that a conspiracy? It involved the British royal family who conspired with the Bolsheviks to fleece the Tsar. You can talk about the media conspiracy in the 1930s during the Great Depression, where the cameras were again shut off and you didn't see the rioting in the streets, right? It's very apropos to what's happening today. There was a wholesale blanketing of the unrest that shocked Detroit, you know, and Chicago and many, you know, Pittsburgh and other industrial towns where thousands and thousands of workers were out in the street, right? And the cameras just shut down. There's the sinking of the Lusitania, open conspiracy. There's Pearl Harbor, open conspiracy. Top generals have whistleblown it. Jekyll Island cabal meeting to form the Federal Reserve, documented. The sons, right, and the offspring of the very men in that cabal have admitted that that all took place. Colonel Mandel House even wrote, you know, and Benjamin Disraeli, these people in their own memoirs and biographies have written about how they fooled everyone. There's been stand down orders. Trotsky, you said, right, and you bring up that link, just in case nobody's ever heard of Leon Trotsky. one of the leading communists. But he was more than a communist. He was the communist who, unlike Lenin and unlike Stalin, wanted immediately after the Bolshevik Revolution to take revolution to all the other countries in the world. And they were looking at him going, do you have that picture? Yeah. So he was the one who wanted universal revolution, world revolution. Even Trotsky and Lenin had to shoot him down. He said, what are you talking about? Sure, we've barely got established in Russia. And that was hard enough. We haven't robbed enough banks yet. We haven't fleeced enough millionaires of their stuff. We haven't hoarded enough of the wealth of the land yet. And you want to immediately be taking it to Outer Mongolia and Bolivia and Ireland? So Trotsky, his scheme, all over the world were Trotskyites going, Leon, we love you. When are you coming? When's revolution coming to our streets? So he had a thing called Young Italy. All Illuminist backed and funded, right? Young Italy. Young Ireland, right? Places I came into the study. Young Turkey. Young Greece. What the hell, right? And look it up. Young Italy. Young Turks. You had Pan-Arabic movement. Look up Pan-Arabic movement. Pan-Turkish movement, right? Mostly made up of young upstarts, hotheads, looking for revolution. Not reading Lenin, finding Lenin insignificant or less significant. Marx, that's got nothing to do with me. He's talking Western. Because remember, the class system, the structure isn't the same in certain countries in the Middle East and the East. Trotsky was the one that they read. Trotsky was like, oh, bring it here. It's dial up a revolution. 1-800 number, right? And Trotsky will pick up the phone. We're coming, boys. Just get the money together and kill off a few more people and rob a few more banks. When I get there, we'll need the cash. Well, this creature, right, actually got over to Europe, into Russia, to start the revolution from Canada.
I know. Canada's got quite a bit of dirt, I got to say.
Check this out. He leaves the Bronx, where he ran a newspaper, lived in a luxury apartment with a horde of comrades. That's the word. Comrades. They're arrested in Nova Scotia, Halifax, isn't it?
Yeah.
The town of Halifax in Nova Scotia. Yes, 1917, April, I think it was. They're arrested, him and his wife, and a whole court of these, quorum of these fucking comrades, all heading over to Russia to fund and start, and they get thousands and thousands of dollars, and they're going to pick up more. They've been given by Jacob Schiff and Kuhn and Loeb big caches of money, but they were going to pick up more millions in Switzerland and in Sweden. I've stood in the train station in Sweden where Lenin himself walked and Trotsky walked, where the mayor of Stockholm came out to have, here's your money, pal. We just love you. Do you see that red carpet? I cleaned it myself with a toothbrush. Okay? I've stood there in a place that the whole history of the world changed for the worst. All right, but he gets to Canada and the Canadian police rightly arrest the bastard because they know exactly who he is. He's an international agent, right? And saboteur. Fifth columnist, agent provocateur, conspirator, whatever you want to call it, right? So he is arrested. Amazing, because we could have gone into Pearl Harbor, whatever. No, this alone proves the point we've been trying to make. He was living in luxury in the Bronx among some of the wealthiest people, this communist, right? This proto-communist, with hundreds of thousands of dollars at his disposal. He passes through into Canada, but is arrested. And that's it. And yet 5 days later, because the red phone rang, the first notice came from the British Embassy, because Canada obviously is a British vassal, right?
That's right.
So the British Embassy, British Canadian Embassy, call Canada and say, let him go, right? They were responding to the U.S. State Department, who said, Mr. Trotsky holds a U.S. passport. That's how we deal with communists in the U.S., right? They're welcome, right? So he is actually holding this U.S. passport, this incendiary world revolutionist who's about to turn the world into total fire for his Luciferian masters, right? Okay, that was the pressure that was needed. And about 5 days later, Trotsky and the whole horde were released. As I say, they went over to the continent. They got onto a special train. They went through Switzerland, where they picked up bags and bags of money from a guy called Parvus. Can't remember the first name. Alexander Parvus, I think his name is. Yes, that's right. Then they went up to Sweden, where they banks there secretly from top millionaire communists. Big difference in capitalists, by the way, just in case anybody hadn't caught that. A rich communist like George Soros is not by any means to be mistaken as a capitalist, which the disinformationalists want you to think is the case. And then they moved through Finland and got into America, got into Russia. And the reason for the Bolsheviks to even get this kind of funding was Germany. Germany, Britain, and America. The secret forces in there, the British Foreign Office funded them. And Germany funded them because Germany was in the middle of the First World War with Russia as one of their enemies. So the Bolsheviks were paid and agreed that if they ever took over power in Petrograd at that time, they would immediately cease the war and pull all the Russian troops away from the front and back to Russia, and the war would be over from the Russian point of view. So Germany had worked with the secret societies like Grand Orient Freemason and whatever. Conspiracy theory we're talking now, guys, so put your, plug your ears up. Come on, turn the volume down, change the channel. It's so painful, isn't it, to be right? So all of these secret societies, which are networked all over the world. So don't you see then, and they're still doing it today, that when somebody goes, well, Germany did this and Britain did that and the British Empire and those Brits impoverished India and America is just a colonial place. I've always, from the age of 15, gone, and what are you talking about? The British did nothing to you. The Germans have done nothing to you. A small, tiny cabal of secret societies with their masters above have done it to you. How dare you use the national terms as if some violent... You don't have secret societies, India? Go to any oppressed place, and I'll point out the lodges that are right there. From the Middle East to the Far East to Japan, there's Masonic societies. Some of them deadly. Not to mention the secret societies like the Tongs and the Triads, and there's even darker ones out there. So who is calling? So even the politicization of world events going, well, the British Empire, I'm from Bombay, India. Terrible things happen, those British. False. You have just heard false information. And if you had a media that was worth its salt, they would have corrected this years ago. So what does the British man, the Irish man, the German man, the Russian man take responsibility for what a bunch of psychopaths who've already eaten off his own land? Right? The Bolsheviks are a small Masonic corrupt group who've sucked the blood out of Russia. How is an ordinary Russian man to be indicted for that? These are the predators. So that's all conspiracy people have ever tried to say, using anecdotes like we've just done. There's a group of predators financed to the tune of millions. They're not wearing the British flag. So already there's a conspiratorial, aspect to this, and it involves the media, and it involves the history books, and it involves the historians from Berkeley and all these other centers of learning who've lied and cheated you. So I do, as you just said, specialize in the works of the men who won't cheat you. Right, who give you it as the facts, and don't blame Germans and don't blame Austrians or whoever or Belgians or whatever. You can tell me that the crimes in the Congo of the Belgian King Leopold II, who's part of Queen Victoria's family, is to be laid at the door of an ordinary Belgian lad.
Right. Well, isn't that the argument, Michael, with what's going on in the West in general right now with this far left movement of cultural Marxism, where they're trying to indict all America for the crimes of slavery, yet they'll never look at the Arab slave trade, or they'll never look at the modern day slavery of all the human trafficking that's still going on that nobody wants to talk about, which is a conspiracy and would inquire all kinds of connections all over the board in order to survive the surveillance state that they can find you anytime they want. They can watch you masturbate from space, but they can't find child predators. But anyways, the thing is they indict all America for being this greedy, corrupt, colonialist, racist, bigoted. But no, it was a fucking handful, like you said, of these people. Like in Canada, they blame all average, everyday, hardworking Canadians for the crimes of genocide against the First Nations people here, of which was egregious and is documented. But that wasn't the average settlers here. We were working with these people. We were trying to help them. In fact, that would have never been whistleblown hadn't it have been for these white colonialist Canadians that would have helped expose the crimes of the church and the crimes of the government working on behalf of the Queen of England. So it's crown and gown that runs the show, not your average hardworking people. And that's why when Trump came in America, he resonated with so many average Americans who were quiet all during the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas, because they're like, shit, our country's getting taken over. When Trump came out, he stood for those middle class. He said, no, we're done with that. And he started a whole movement there. And what did that media do? They didn't just turn on Trump, they turned on those average hardworking Americans. And that same blueprint was done in European countries. It's done in Canadian countries. Any politician in my country that stands for everyday Canadians and wants to support the charter and freedom and all that, they're branded as a white supremacist. So it's just, you've just exposed where all this really began. And we're dealing here, are we not, with this Communist International. And that, here we go. It's even, you can find it on Wikipedia, for crying out loud. Look at this. Look at this. You can go research a thing called the Communist International. You can go look at the symbols, the groups that are a part of it. They're now going to tell you, oh, it's all dead and gone. There's nothing to see here. But even Antonio Gutierrez, who is the chief of the UN, he's one of the heads of these communist groups. He's one of them. And so many others are part of it. So this is the whole thing, is they always try to blame the average person out there. But really, we're talking about these elites at the end of the day, these L's, the priesthood of the Illies.
There are documents at Grand Orient headquarters in Paris that have Lenin's own signature on it. So wow. Preponderance of the energy, preponderance of the evidence. Our work has fulfilled that, right? It doesn't mean that there's not still further tutorial to go. There is. And that means, you know, the people have to be receptive. I think they're more receptive now than ever. But you're quite right. These people often are card carrying, and they don't actually hide. UK column Brian Gerrish is always making the statement, and I love him for doing this, that he says that even on YouTube, right, the various Bilderberger groups, you know, these various UN quangos and all sorts of groups like that, steering committee groups, publish videos on YouTube where you can see them talking about, I've put up from the World Bank, I do this all the time, right?
Yeah.
It gets one view.
It's true, they don't get any hits.
It gets one like. Yeah, I'm not shadow banned. I'm not deplatformed. It got a hit, it got a like, and even got one share, maybe. I have to check on that. I think it did. Right? But Gerrish is in the same boat, and they're saying that, look, it's open conspiracy. But if the cognitive, you know, dissonance is there and you're not connecting the dots, then you don't see it in plain view. Every single thing that is happening now is many decades old. It has many precedents. Oh, every single aspect. You know, if you study the Reign of Terror, you know, in the period of Napoleon, it all fits the Trump election period and all the things that happened. If you study the Russian Revolution, it's so uncannily similar. You know, what the press was doing, what the media was doing, what the poor folks were doing, whatever. It's so extraordinarily, you know, apropos, and it's like a throwback. But again, you know, maybe if we just want to round it up and finish, I always then have as solutions the legalistic over the political, right? Doesn't exclude the political, but it certainly trumps it, right? Your legal empowerment, because that's what it is, it's empowerment. If you operate in the political milieu, there'll be nothing but disenchantment. If you operate in the legal, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, and they resist it when you say it. But it is actually a fact that when you do, and I'm not talking about any alternative form of bizarro, you know, legalese or legalistic adventures. I'm talking about just within the normal system. There's a lot that you can do. And on top of that, there is this issue of succession, which again, I'm glad to see has come to the table, right? It may not happen, but even if it doesn't, at least that word and that concept has reached the public ear now. Succession, right? Like Texit. We had Brexit, now we have Texit, right? It's fantastic because that is another model. The Native American Indians have used it to their own extreme, not only empowerment, but wealth. You know, to go sovereign, to have lands that they have that are sovereign. This is similar to that, right? And there used to be great institutes like the Middleton Institute that would walk you through the whole thing. These guys were deplatformed over 15 years ago. I've been following them since then. And other groups, good people in the South, trying to educate America about succession, that if the federal government so violates the rules, the original statutes by which you joined the Union, you can step back and retract, you know, and you can rescind that and gain a kind of a sovereignty, and that sovereignty will then allow you to, you know, build better institutions, get rid of corruption, and so on. Not perfect, because states are often just as corrupt as the federal government. I don't see really that much difference. Many of the crimes that are on the books actually just states did. The federal government wasn't even involved in it.
We got a better
I'm not a
chance of
person who
getting.
believes.
We got a better chance of getting good people in the states, though, as opposed to federal, right? Maybe.
Yes, and more chance of getting dirty people out.
Right.
So it's not an ultimate remedy. Nothing that I'm saying is, but it is at least good to know what tools you've got in your box. And on a good day, right, if succession works well, then yes, then it is very, very powerful. And it's a good thing to get away from the federal system, because then now you have better control over immigration, better control over, medical practices, more over education, the prison system, over your judges.
Your property rights.
The judges have no say. The judges in New York have no say now over your. So yes, I'd look to that as one of the tools that can be used in a desperate situation. We're up against the wall, so even things that on another day I wouldn't recommend, now I will, because it's war. We're up against the wall, and there are certain things that you can do. When you're circling the wagons and it's that last go around. Believe me, there are things that you can do. They're by no means perfect, but there's things that you can do that can help with corruption, especially when the sea around you is filled with sharks. And there's many other things that you can do on a state level, to treat your people better, give them more rights, wheel back on some of these idiotic federalistic mandates, especially those that are coming out of Europe, cut back on this extraordinary wave of immigration. You can have open carry, where you bring back gun laws where even women and others, and if a woman is open carrying, chances are her house is not going to get broken into and all her kids raped and murdered. Just a point.
Exactly.
Passing. Yeah. Come on ahead, So these are brilliant things that can still happen. It's very sad in life that sometimes, your seat has to be burning before that kind of insight and wisdom and commitment returns. But I can also understand the power of affluence. Right? America's been brought down more by affluence than by vice. More by apathy, than by a genuine lack of interest in what's going on. So there are terrible, terrible things happening. There's a lot of technical takeover. Yes, big corporations are ramped up their control, but never does that mean that you can't strike back. And succession is a legitimate on the books. See, I'm not talking about any kind of incendiary behavior here or plan. This is on the books.
It's lawful.
Those nations willfully joined the union. But if the union violates the state has the absolute right. And now, as I said, Texas is right in the middle of doing it. They've got up to almost 40%, votes to do it. Brilliant sign. And just the very fact that even ordinary Republicans who may never have heard of this kind of thing, or the people on the right, these are words that maybe a lot of them had never heard of before. Now you have it in your toolkit. To me, that's a good thing.
Really good thing. And just to think proactively and think about secession in the terms of what we're doing right now with social media and streaming platforms. Like I'm streaming right now on the Foxhole, which is just in its infancy. It just started like a month ago. And it started by patriots, by truthers, by people who want to have a free voice to share their opinion without constantly being hit with strikes and taken down and censorship. Look at Rumble, look at BitChute, look at Telegram, Gab, Clout Hub. Look at these platforms. So the more that because remember, in the end, these conspirators, these illuminists, these religious-minded people of their own religion, they're small. And then their followers are really, like the real diehards, we're talking 20, 30%. The vast majority of people are either on the fence, don't know who to trust, but would believe you if you convince them. And then the other people are on our side already. So that means that the more they try to censor and do all this stuff on the big platforms, then what did we do? We're seceded from their dominion and created a totally new world of online content sharing. And that will continue, even if it has to be that we build our own printing presses and go back to magazines and pamphlets and books. And if they try to burn those, well, God damn it, then it's war. But here we are. I'm just saying that there are positives and there's an action in what you're saying. And we can, as individuals, secede from that union psychologically and spiritually. Like this brilliant guy, Chris, what's his name? He's a Canadian guy. I don't know if you saw the video, Michael. It's like 3 minutes where he goes into a Canadian airport. And what's been going on in Canada is our government has made it a federal mandate, because of coronavirus, of course, that any Canadian that leaves Canada and comes back in has to go through 3 stages of PCR testing, which is in question at the highest levels of medicine right now. And if they can't pass it on their own expense, they have to pay for a hotel stay for the duration of a quarantine. So they're locked into the hotel. They can't leave. It's surrounded by armed guards and security, and they have to pay for their own incarceration. That's what Canada is at right now. So what was the point? This one guy, he goes into the airport, and all these people are lined up like cattle with their masks, and they're doing the test where they jam a freaking thing right up into your brainstem or something to test see if they got coronavirus. And he goes, he walks in, the police come up to him. They're like, "Excuse me, sir, you are required to wear a mask." He's like, I just love his personality. You got to watch the video. He's like, "I got a medical exemption, so I don't need one. Thank you very much." And then he walks over. They're like, "Sir, you need to test." Like, "I'm not going to take your test because it violates," and he lists the rules. He goes, "It violates Section 7 and Section 6 of the Constitution, and it violates Section 14.1 of the Emergency Powers Act. So I don't need to do shit." And then he goes, then the cops are kind of like, "Okay, well, can you show us some ID?" He's like, "Fine, here's my ID." He was super happy. And then after the cop goes, "Okay, well, I have to write you a ticket." He's like, "I'll take the ticket." And he's filming this. And he goes, "Hey, look, listen, not one of these tickets that went to court has been paid. They've all been thrown out because they completely violate all of the law. So give me a little piece of paper and I'll take it to the court and it'll be thrown out tomorrow. So thank you so much." Yeah. And then after the video, this is what's amazing. All the cops, when the videos stopped rolling, he did another show after and he said, "Yeah, you know what? They were all shaking my hands, the cops. They were all in support. They're like, 'Good for you, man. Good for you.'" So just one guy, and that went viral. I think he's going to be on InfoWars now. Like he's got a whole thing going on. And it just one guy making a video, telling and again, using what you said, the legalese, knew what he was talking about, wasn't a dick, didn't go and start getting violent or yelling at anybody. It was effective. And now he's helping to wake up so many more people. And we're just at the beginning of this.
Yeah, there are people do that. And it backs up what I've been saying for years. The person that you're dealing with at the bottom of the ladder has no idea about the legalese. And the moment that you even try to take one of them, and you must always do it with great courtesy and polite and go, "Look, I know, I have nothing against you personally, but you realize, of course, that I have not committed any actual crime. You understand that you're detaining me with my consent at this point." Then you immediately get them to say that, answer that, and then you could go to the next level of saying, "Are you on your oath?" If it's a British cop or a Canadian cop, policeman, they'll know what that means. And right away, you're pulling that little ding. Because when you say, "Are you on your oath?" it means you are standing for common law, right? You're here to protect common law. This is what they themselves read in the oath. So if he says, let's just hypothetically say he doesn't try to answer your question with a question, all the nonsense they get up to, that's a whole separate, way around that. But just imagine he says, "Yes, I'm on my oath." He goes, and then you just say, "Well, then you must be upholding common law. But the essence of common law is that you need my consent to either detain or arrest me. And since I've committed no crime, if you do detain or arrest me, I can sue you for false arrest. Not that I'd like to, officer, but I'm just letting you know my rights." And you could say the same thing to a Safeway owner or pizza parlor guy who's messing with you and doesn't want. And then they say, "Well, I'm going to call the police on you," because they just want to have one up. And you turn around and go, "There's really, I wish you wouldn't do that. But if you want to, go right ahead, because I'm just going to have the same conversation I had with you right now with them as well, and nothing will happen. But the only thing that will happen is within 48 hours, I'm going to sue you for the violation of my civil rights, which I don't want to do, because I'm sure you're a good person and don't, you probably are. You probably are just following, the dictates. Do you have anyone in your family that's legal? Can give you legal advice? Is there a legal department here in your store? You go down that. You go. Obviously, you know very little about it. Then I would assume that you. And if you don't want to, I'll be happy within the next 24 hours to have my lawyer contact you, who will fill you in then on what my civil rights and the common law is. So all done politely but eloquently. It's the thing I've been saying from day one in my work, is try to be galvanize the facts, marshal the facts at your hand, be extremely cordial and belligerent. You don't need to be, because these are strengths. You only weaken yourself when you start throwing the fists around. That person doesn't know anything. But just like you just said now, he might learn something after you operate this way. That cop may now go back and start looking through the oath and looking through the common law to find out, consent is the essence of the common law. I didn't even really, I learned it by rote, but I never really computed it. So you're actually doing a really good thing. And if you wanted to, not that I would recommend it, but if you had a website or you wanted to go further, and then you can do all of that later by letter. Dear sir, thank you very much. Like, for instance, say I got into a hassle with somebody who was a shopkeeper owner. I absolutely would have my lawyer on to them. And if I got arrested and taken down, I would make sure that when I'm released from the prison, from the police station, because you have nothing on you and they know that they don't, and your lawyer turned up to help you, I would, with my lawyer, have a properly scripted letter sent to that punk at that shop or medical center or wherever it was, to say, just to let you know, nothing happened. I was released within minutes of being taken down. And by the way, and the lawyer would then write in some legalese on such, like your fellow did there. So there's multiple ways to come at this. These are empowering. Either you know it verbally and you get out of it, but the one thing that'll happen, and you see, if you say to a police officer, "Are you on your oath?" Or "Are you upholding the common law?" Or "By whom are you addressing me as a person or a sovereign entity?" Or you just say, let's make it easy. Say you do say to them, "Are you a lawyer?" Not to a police officer, but this would be somebody, punk in a store, the owner of a store. "Are you a lawyer?" And he'll, "Are you?" Right? See, they'll try to answer you with a question. Go, "No, please don't answer my questions with questions. I need a legal answer to my question. Are you a lawyer?" That's the second time you've asked. If he doesn't answer again, then you repeat the same thing as a question the third time. "Are you a lawyer?" On the third time, if they don't answer, you now, by rights, and you should be taping this, by the way. They have body cams. You can have one.
Totally.
You would tape it. On the third time, the law of the land, listen to me very carefully here, the law of the land has just empowered you. That if they are dodging the question or answering back with a question, as long as they don't answer your question, you say, "Look, I'm asking you this for legal reasons. Are you a lawyer? Do you know anything about the law?" And they, for 3 times, dodge it or don't answer. You now have the legal right, by all that's fucking holy in the world, you have the right now to answer for them and to assume, "Well, I guess you're not a lawyer. Right? I guess I'm not talking to a lawyer or anyone who knows anything about the law." And you then take it from there. He'll go, and then even if he goes, "Yeah, but are you a lawyer?" You mean, "No, but I know a great deal about civil rights and the lawyers, and I've consulted many lawyers over this matter, because I guess what you're talking about now is a mask or something to do with COVID, right?" "Yeah." "Yeah, well, then I'm not a lawyer, but I do know a great deal about the law pertaining to this matter." Where's the low-hanging fruit? But the thing is, even if they leave you at that point, but say he doesn't, just point-winning people are point winners, right? So they want to call the cops or something on you for that reason. Then go through the motions, because I'll tell you what will happen. When you are actually finally let go from the office, just like this guy you're talking about was just let go, you have not only won your own personal empowerment, and you can write the whole story down in a very clear, non-incendiary way to that party. Never again, now that that's documented, will you ever be hassled again by any of these groups. Because once the local MP, and the local police station and the chief of police and the medical center all are given copies of this, or they just know by the grapevine if you're living in a small sort of place, watch what happens when you're going through airports and all of these things. You'll never be hassled again, because they go to the low-hanging fruit. The moment that you empower yourself legally, even if it might be a bit of trouble doing it the first time round, well, actually, it really even should be that trouble, but you know what I mean? It's a hassle, right? Yeah, we'll go through the hassle, because they always will go away. They'll leave, they'll just part the waves, and they won't want to deal with anyone who has a modicum of knowledge. And this is just working within the normal common law. There are other things from outside it, like equity law and other things that you can use that are much more powerful. This is just simply stating your rights and pushing it through, and using a regular lawyer to assist you in matters like this. And the thing is that these people don't know even the basics, and they don't know, therefore they don't know when they're violating it. So this is part of spiritual sovereignty. So, and we're in this mess. This is how I can prove what I'm talking about, is because we are in this mess because not a single person knows how to, work this way within the law. They know how to shout at cops who pull them over and ridicule and belittle. That's not what I'm talking about, right? And even if you have to take a ticket, yeah, then at that point you take the ticket, and he's just doing his job, and then you work it out at the clerk's office, and you send the the letters to saying, I didn't give my consent for this and all of that. That all takes place at a later date. You never fight with the agency, not even if they're quite belligerent to you. Even if they manhandle you, you'll never win your case by fighting belligerently on the street like a bunch of Saturday night barflies. You have to use the laws that are already on the books, and they're there for a reason. And consent is absolutely And if the person violates your consent, you do in fact have the right to legally sue them. And you say, oh, I'm not going to be suing Safeway. I'm going to be suing you personally, mate. I've nothing against you. And I know you're probably doing this, because you think it's right. But you are actually violating my civil rights. And I have, for one, don't let that happen. Ever. Nobody. When you're going through passport offices, if anybody's doing that right now, then you don't argue with them like this guy did. There's one thing wrong about what this guy did. He argued with them there, and that was his choice at the moment when you're trying to take a flight. What you should normally do is inform the passport office that they have no right to, debar you from consent. You already send letters, right, of exemption to these people, even to your local MP and other things like that. You make sure that the clinic, places you might be concerned with. This is going to matter because if your job turns around tomorrow and says you can't have the job unless you're vaccinated, right, you would have had to have shown lack of consent prior to the moment. You can still do it at that moment, but it's much better if you forecast it by having a lawyer drop a letter that points out the Nuremberg statutes and the UNESCO rights and whatever it might be, or the local common law. You have to. It's smarter for you to learn a bit of this, to then send letters ahead of time to your boss, the legal department of wherever you're hired, or going to be hired, or to the passport office, so that they already have your name. And then what they look down, they see that your name's on. Go ahead, surf through. They won't even challenge you because they know other people are watching. And the merest chance that you might win with your legalese, and God knows who's listening, let alone their own staff members, watch out what happens. You'll just be walked right through. Because the whole thing is based in fraud. Right? This whole thing is a criminal enterprise. And once you have plugged it, once you are fortified against it, chances are nobody in the community is going to ever hassle you again. And even if they do, you've got that photocopied letter. Here, would you like to read what my lawyer has to say about it? Since you obviously don't know, I asked you 3 times, you didn't say you know anything about the law, because I know you don't. Well, let me inform you what the law is. Could you read that while I'm continuing my shopping without a mask? You see, so
Yeah,
this is where we've
100%.
got to get to, folks. This is not that heavy. Yeah. And unfortunately, we're in a very feminized society right now who people bow to these, tyrants. We consent to the tyranny. No, consent to freedom. Consent to truth first. And get all those voices in your ears that stop you being manly and heroic out of your thinking. You think the psychology is involved in any of this? It's just all political wrangling and maneuvers. Think again. Political gymnastics is one thing. Psychological cleansing and returning to yourself as not only a sovereign being, but a heroic being. And this goes out for men and women. There's a thing called masculinity. Look it up. Find out what it is, because it's dying. The tyranny of the masses. That's the disease that COVID couldn't even come near. There's pandemics that you don't even know about.
Wow. What an amazing way to wrap it up, Michael. That was incredible. I hope everybody took notes. It's so important what you're saying, that personal empowerment. And that does, like you said, it does a lot for you as a being, as a person, to not just sit back and wait for somebody to do it. You're the one that's going to do it. And the more people that do it, see, these cops and these judges and these business owners are used to dealing with sheep. Don't be one of them, and get them used to dealing with real people who believe in truth, freedom, and justice. And that's what's going to change the day. They're just going, as you said, on our consent. We've signed on for every part of this, and it's time we get rid of it. Go ahead.
Those were hypotheticals. I was just these are hypothetical situations. If you just want to go to the store, stick a fucking mask on for 2 minutes to get,
right,
a tube of toothpaste, go ahead, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, in the worst case situation, if it really started to come down to be more mandatory and more draconian, then these are the techniques you use. You can use the path of least resistance as you want. I'm by no means somebody who's telling anyone to,
start fighting
be
everybody.
thorny for the sake of it, right? And most lawyers will just go, why don't you just consent? But you say you don't have to, right? By law, there's consent, non-consent, and what's called conditional consent. Non-consent is obviously when you're fighting them and you're saying, I'm not putting on no matter what. Conditional consent is when you say, well, I'll do it if you do this, right? I'll put on the mask and wear it if you, wait for a call from my lawyer, who obviously you need to know the facts of the matter, right? Oh shit, no, I don't want to have your lawyer call me, so just go about your business, or we'll make an exemption. Or it is non-consent, full-blown non-consent, right? But if you non-consent, then you have to be able to back that up, because in the tit-for-tat world of these assholes who have, they're Adlerian, right? Superiority types who will call the police just to get one up on you, law or no law. You got to be ready for that. And that's what complicates it. So I'm always looking at the tyranny of the masses. When the police arrive and you say those things to you, like that guy did in the airport that you're talking about, probably they will back off because they know more about the law than that punk did. But this is what you're up against. You're not up against the law of the law of the law of the law. You're up against small potatoes person, petty tyrant, petty Hitler, clipboard wearing sergeant major, right? Who's got nothing and is no one. Right? These anti-Karens running around. You see, you've got these people who they're the tyranny of the masses. That's my focus. So if you do want to put it to them, do it through letter first. If you eat at the same place a lot and you've been giving some dirty looks, by all means get their address, or if they have a legal representative or department, ask for it on the phone. Call them up and say, "Hey, I'm one of your customers. I want to inform you guys about the whole mask thing and the statues. I'm sure you don't know anything about that. Who can I talk to? I'm going to be sending a letter. Or do you want to talk to him on the phone? No, I just want his name and address. I'm going to be sending them a letter. So just a courtesy. Oh, okay. And do it that way. See, once that letter has arrived, it's red carpet all the way, mate. They're not going to bother you at all. Everybody else will be sitting around with their masks, smoking their cigarettes, or trying to eat through the mask, but they won't bother you. Hanging themselves with their mask. No, 2 masks. What am I talking about? The double mask. That's the one you need to worry about.
That's the one.
Breathe in your own mucus.
Yeah.
All day long. That's that's what you want to get. That's what you want to be doing. Yeah. All your sneezes and mucus and filth and germs and
CO2
oral bacteria and fucking we breathe in and out because Mother Nature ordained it. But somebody knows better, right? No, look, nobody knows better. And the more that you fight, if this was a criminal case, you'd fight, wouldn't it? If somebody in your family was arrested that was innocent, wouldn't you then arm yourself up with legalese? Wouldn't you then be calling your lawyer? What is I'm asking you to see? Like I said at the very beginning of the show, none of this is really rocket science. We're only ever asking you to do what you normally would do if your neighbor's dog kept pissing on your lawn, or somebody stole your car. It's nothing more than that. In fact, it's empowering because you're actually finding out the law of the land that can be used on the highest or the lowest. You'll be using it on the lowest. Hey, the law is the law. That can be used on a mayor, a governor, right? A senator. I can't think of anything more empowering. If you compare the political empowerment beside the legal, I go for the legal every time. I'm not wrong. Yeah. I've had hundreds of people tell me, that that's not true. But I've stood by it because I'm not talking about something that I learned last year. I've read Rape of Justice by Eustace Mullins back in 1991. Right, pick up that book and tell me that Eustace Mullins is wrong, not Michael Tsarion.
Absolutely. This has been amazing, incredible. And I just wanted to quickly let people know about this awesome presentation that we just completed for Unslaved. We brought on Chance Garton. This is his 3rd time appearing on Unslaved. He's just come up with some amazing insight into talking about symbolism in video games. We looked at that Cyberpunk 2077 game and found loads of this satanic Luciferian symbolism in there. And we did a very, very good first part. We're going to do a second part coming up very soon. So check it out on Unslaved. And Michael, maybe just a quick word also about the announcements you've had about some of the upcoming premium content that you have for Unslaved members.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a whole 5 parts of Idealism. That series, it will be coming out soon. Catastrophism and the work of Emmanuel Velikovsky, Commons Beaumont. A lot of these were put on hold for various reasons. They're starting to be put together. Gnosticism, part 2 and 3, and Monstrous Feminine. The list is endless. There's at least 15 ready to go. There's one on Yuri Lina, Under the Sign of the Scorpion. I've got one on the Tarot, right? I mean, there's so many there. I can't even remember them all. And these are premiums, because they had a special onus on doing them well. The deepest research that we built Unslaved for will we start back in production real soon. That's mostly for members, but anybody else coming to Unslaved, they may be confused between the regular podcast, other content that we have, and then these premiums. So yeah, the premiums are back in production.
I can't wait.
Thanks to members for that.
Yeah, exactly. And for the members over there, you're what keep it alive, keep Michael's work alive, this research. We've got more announcements coming up soon about some upgrades. And we're going to continue fighting this fight. So, Michael, thank you so much once again, spending time with everybody. You're getting loads of love and great chat in the chats here. And hopefully this gets shared far and wide. And we'll definitely have you back again for updates in the near future. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We got lots more coming your way. Stay tuned here on Truth Warrior and Unslaved, and we'll catch everybody next time.